So we'll start with the Nokar mantra. Om Namo Arihantanam. Om Namo Siddhanam. Om Namo Ayariyanam. Om Namo Vajayanam. Namo Loe Savasahunam. Eso Panchanamokaro. Salva Pavapanasano. Mangalalancha Salvesim. Paramam Have Mangalam. Paramam Have Mangalam. So I used our time off to review our archives. If you don't know, you can find our archives at jainismforeveryone.com. And so what I realized is that it's a lot of me talking and less of you talking. So I'd like to change that a little bit and have it be more of a discussion. And so I thought today we'd have an open discussion day. So the first thing I want to ask you, a lot of times I feel like I learn something and then I turn it over in my head and I have a question or comment about it, but it's too late because we're not in the class anymore or the time has passed or I can't ask somebody about it. So do you have any questions or comments on any of our classes that we had previous?
I was thinking about our last class, the Anekantvad, the class one. So if I put that things to the test, say nothing is true, nothing is what we know is right.
No, it's not that nothing is true. Because the blind man there's still an elephant there.
Elephant there, right?
So we don't perceive it correctly, and we often make incorrect assumptions.
So, can I say the same thing for Jainism? What I've been seeing, what I understand, cannot be the fact. May not be the fact.
Right, and that's the examples that, for example, Neil brought up. This thing about, well, what is the purpose of not eating after sunset, right? And if that purpose is gone, then can I, even though quote-unquote Jainism has said you shouldn't do it, am I being a bad Jain or am I attracting bad karma, which is more relevant if I do it? And we talked about, well, the whole purpose is the examination. And you put it through that filter and you make up your mind. And then if you do receive bad karma, you accept that. You accept the consequences of your actions. So it is true that you should look at Jainism from an Anekantvad perspective.
True.
You guys came in on an easy day. It's an open discussion day because I've been talking too much as I review our archives. So we're talking about questions or comments that we had on anything previous in case you've turned it over in your head. If you want to have a little reminder, we talked about Anekantvad. We talked about Ahimsa. Before that, we talked about... we did actual meditation. I don't know if you guys were here for that. I like that one. We talked about how to get rid of anger, ego, deceit, and greed in your life, which is hard because you're good people. And we went over the karma theory, which we'd liken to a mountain of dirt on your soul. I don't know if you guys remember that. This was a very nice one. We went over the power of stories and how the stories you tell yourself about yourself can affect your life. And I really was quite taken aback that most of you guys don't believe you're a soul. So how do we change that? Because once you start believing you're a soul, that's the first step to change your life, because if you are a soul, then different things take priority in your life. If you believe you are a soul, you'll think differently, you'll act differently. That really is the catalyst to your life changing. I don't know how many of you were here, but we went around the room and basically it was only one person that believed that he was a soul. And so how can we get you guys to believe you're a soul? So here's one thing. I've done for myself. So I have thought about my actions and those consequences, and because the karma theory is true, I have put together actions and consequences that have come later together and verified for myself that karma theory is true. Has anybody tried to do that? Has anybody tried to think of, well, why is this happening to me now? And come to a realization that this is happening to me now because of something I did previously.
Yeah, a lot of times.
Yeah, a lot of times.
Yeah,
Can you tell us about some of the times?
So.
Because if we kind of see this as evidence, we will start believing we are souls.
Yeah, so I don't obviously relate to as to what I would have done in the past, but the way I look at it is, for example, last 1.5 years I've been desperately waiting to get promoted, and it was stretching like anything, like a rubber band. And every quarter I get a commitment from my senior leadership that it's all done, Sandeep. Don't worry, it's done. It's just a matter of getting these out, and then again it slips, and month after month, and that last 16 or 18 months has been really painful, and I get disappointed obviously because you're expecting and things are coming from your unit head or vice president of the company, and if those are not being kept, then you feel dejected, right? Then the way I looked at it was I leaned towards spirituality or Jainism, and then I started thinking in those lines that maybe I had done something in the past, that is why things are getting delayed, or I am just paying for what I've done.
Right.
And that way I try to console myself and not really get bothered about why it is not happening. So I see that not just with this example, with several of them, that you feel like you would have something is there attached to your soul, which is why it is now going off, and again it depends on how you react. So if you get more tensed, or if you react in a way in which you should not, then more karma get attached to your soul, right? So that way, that is how I have learned in the last few months, just to keep myself not having a lot of expectation, and then be normal and just go with the flow.
Yeah, so with regards to my life, I have two specific examples I can think of that prove to me that karma theory was true. One time I stole something, and a while later something was stolen from me. Now you might say that's a coincidence. I don't believe it was a coincidence because of the nature of what happened. And also another time I got greedy about something, and then I was punished for a year for getting greedy about something. And then when the realization hit me that whatever I was currently in this punishment because of that, instantly it lifted. I don't even know why. I'll tell you what happened. It happened in the shower, right? I was thinking about it, and I was thinking about what was going wrong in my life, because it was like this year-long punishment in my life. And I was thinking about what was going wrong and how I could change it. And I remembered that one time. I remembered it, and I was like, I got greedy that one time, and could this be the reaction? And I'll tell you what, that day, it lifted, okay? And that day, several good things started happening to me. And I put two and two together, and I realized, like, oh, okay, I got greedy, and I was punished from it, and when it lifted, then things started happening for me, and my life started turning around. And that made me believe. I believed in it before, but that provided evidence for me. So I encourage you to look at your life and look at the things that are happening to you now, and think about why they may be happening to you based on your karma. So today is an easy day. We're doing an open discussion day because I talk too much and you guys don't talk enough. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go through our previous discussions, and if you guys have any questions or comments, we'll talk about that. And what we're talking about now is, unfortunately, most of us don't believe we're souls, and we're trying to find out why. And I'm trying to get you guys to believe that you're souls, because that will be a catalyst for your life to change. And so one way to do it is to find evidence that this karma theory is true. And once you find evidence of that, well, then it's obvious that you are a soul. So how else can we start believing that we're souls? Well, one way is to uncover the happiness, the characteristics of your soul. The characteristics of your soul are infinite knowledge, infinite happiness, infinite peace, and so on, right? And if your mind is still enough, you'll start to feel that. That's what people feel when they start to meditate, right? So and it's possible to it's possible to experience your soul directly, okay? So once you start doing meditation and uncovering that from your soul, that's one way to help you believe your soul when you get those benefits from meditation. So going back further into our archives, we did awareness exercises at the start of this year. We might do that one again. I was disappointed in how that one came out because we didn't really come to any realization. So we might do that again after we talked about everything we talked about this year. Last year we talked about why we do things in English and English only. We talked about how to bring young people back into our Jain centers. We talked about prayer. We talked twice about prayer, why prayer is important and what we should think about when we pray. We talked about the 5 minor vows, the 6 substances. Oh, we talked about Mahavir's life. In case any of you haven't listened to that discussion, we talked about the historical evidence of his life and what he went through his life. We talked about meditation, the types of karma. We talked about nirjara, mindfulness. We talked about how to communicate Jainism to our children. That was a very good discussion that we had. Relaxation strategies, anger, ego, deceit, and greed, which we talk about all the time. Oh, I like this one, emotions. We talked about what are emotions and how they, how you can change your life by thinking differently about your emotions. We talked about is clean meat being Jain. We talked about whether you have free will or not. I encourage you to go back to that one. And we talked about you are not your thoughts. So that's just a little reminder of what we've been through so far. Any questions or comments on any of that? Anybody have any realizations about what we talked about after we talked about it later on? Has anybody taken a look at the website and listened to the class that they missed? Oh, that's great.
I've done that.
Oh, that's great.
I've even forwarded it to someone else. Like, hey, this might be something you might want to listen to.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for that. That must be why our subscriber count increased.
I listened to the stories. There is a
Right.
stories section also. So.
Oh, that's great. All right. So now let's talk about things that are going on in your life right now. And while you think about things that are going on in your life, I'll tell you one thing that's going on in my life. So my children treat my wife much better than me. And I realize that I've become the bad cop and she's become the good cop. And so I was letting it get to me, right? But using mindfulness and taking a look at the big picture, I've been able to overcome that, right? I've been able to overcome kind of having to be the bad guy or having to dish out punishments or things like that. And I know that they'll come around. And I know that our relationship will change because our relationship is always changing. So I know it gets a little better from here. So let's talk about what's going on in your life. The holidays are coming up. Things are getting very stressful, very busy. December's almost over practically with all the stuff we have to do.
I can share something, it is a current thing for me, but goes back to the realization of soul. So
yeah.
One thing I have learned, or I'm trying to learn, I should say, is that there are, at work or in your personal life, there are always few things that's bothering you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the way I have operated in past is that I'm very focused. If I have something on my list, that is it.
Right.
And there is a to-do list that I have on my laptop, and my wife always tells me, don't put it on your list, because if it is on your list, that's it. I'm like, it has to happen, otherwise it doesn't go, right?
Right.
So the list thing helps me because I'm focused. I know which 20 things I should be doing in next quarter or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then there are always few challenges with that. and it can be maybe some personality that I'm dealing with, some person, their attitude or whatever. It can be anything. So one thing I have learned is going back to karma, few of the things that I'm focusing on are not that easy to achieve. So I'm constantly looking at it, the person, why he's not doing, he or she or whatever, right? And then, I realized that when I do that, I'm building negative energy around myself because now I'm getting upset, I'm frustrated, the person is not behaving or not doing the way I'm expecting that person to do, right? Then again, when it comes to expectation, having expectation is the key of one of the reasons why we are unhappy at times, right?
You had a covert contract with them.
Correct. So what I have realized is that being focused is good and having expectation is maybe okay, but if you're constantly harping on those negativities, then I'm just building karma around myself. And I have realized that at times, and sometimes, and my dad is a great mentor to me, right? I'll share with him that, hey, this is something that's not working out. And he's very much into dharma and, all those religious things. And he would tell me that, Kaushik, that's good, but let it go. Let it sit on it where it is and don't try to change it because it's not in your control. And I realized that when I start thinking negatively about those particular situations and let it go, focus somewhere else where it's a little bit more productive or positive, it automatically works out for me because now I'm not building bad karma around thinking negative about someone, right? Otherwise, I'm constantly thinking every day when I am in, depending on what that situation, if it is office or something else. Usually it's not office, but something else that I do on my own. And I'm like, okay, let it go. Hopefully it will work out. And then the person who I'm dealing with will realize that, no, that's not the right thing to do or something like that. And it has worked for me. So maybe that's something that may help others, but constantly thinking about it and especially negatively may not help you.
And you know what's so amazing is that you knew that, right? You didn't need your dad to tell you that. You knew it, but you were so wrapped up in it. That's what we call delusion, right? You were so wrapped up in the day-to-day or the minutia that you knew it. Even in the back of your mind, you knew it while you were experiencing that. But you didn't know how to break out of it.
That's right.
Right? And somehow you were able to, whether it was a reminder from your dad, which is an external mindfulness technique, or something like that, and then you realize the consequence, and you put two and two together, and when the realization happened, you're like, how could it have been any other way?
Exactly.
Right? So that's what's amazing. So that's the benefits of getting the Jainism outside of these four walls and into our life. Because we all know it, right? You all know it, but it's just so hard when you go out and you drive your car and you go home and you're wrapped up in the fights you have with your kids, and I'm meting out punishments to my kid or whatever because they're acting up, and I know it, but when it occurs, you're so wrapped up in it, and that's why we call it monia karma, right? Deluding karma. Because you could know the answer and still not even be able to implement the answer. Because something is blocking you, some obstacle is blocking you, right? That's why we call this there's particular obstacle clearing karma, right? Go ahead.
And in this case, just a little bit more. So I've been struggling on this for 6 months. My dad last month, he said, forget about it. Don't expect anything out of this person. He's not going to do what you want. And then I was visiting India. It was a not planned trip. I had to go for work. And the day I land, next day morning, this person calls me and he tells me basically what I wanted him to do. Kaushik, how about meeting tomorrow morning and let's do this? This makes sense. Don't you think? I'm like, oh wow, thank you. And that's what I've been saying for 6 months, right? So it changes. So I don't know. I just think that it is how you think and how you behave and try away from negativity and
right.
So
anybody else on an example of how we took what we've learned or what we've discussed outside of here and into our life?
One of the things I do want to share with the group, same example what you mentioned, part of what you mentioned, everybody has something, expectations that we do not get the things, and we get into a mode of starting questioning and re-questioning ourselves, what we have done, what we should have done. So one of the Gati Karma, and I was just looking for the because I had it in my old book. The one that helped me, and I always talk about this one to my kids, is something. It's an Antarai Karma. The Antar means the distance. Antarai Karma. It's an obscuring karma that basically is the reason behind things that you expected, you want something to do and doesn't happen. So as soon as you read this chapter, as soon as you understand that concept of Antarai Karma, that will take away a lot of this type of feeling, a lot of these items. One of my cousin who has huge factory in India, and he has gone through the last 3 years, he has gone through so many transition, one after another one, and what he wanted to do, what we wanted to do, we never could make it. So for a year and a half now, we talk about this piece, and I mean, things came out so well after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
It was much better than what we both were planning to do. And the only way we could get out of it is talking about few of these items.
Mm-hmm.
So either you understand certain theories, and you have to take it as a face value. Just like everything else, if you start going into, my mind works pretty black and white. Being an engineer is always black and white.
Right.
I don't want any gray areas.
Right.
Certain things you have to take it as a face value, and once you start applying that, then say, yeah, it makes sense. You work towards something, and all of a sudden something completely different happens, and then you look back and say, oh, I was looking for something which was very petty, very small.
Mm-hmm.
This is much bigger, much better. What you got.
Right.
So that particular one, Antarai Karma, is absolutely, I would recommend anybody who wants to go through this type of an experience, who is currently facing it, much helpful.
Great. Anyone else?
I mean, all this sounds great, and using applying Jainism a lot of times, but I guess it's a slow process for me. It's
Mm-hmm.
especially with the kids and expectations and all that. We've lived a life where we have a way of doing things, and then people come into your lives, and we don't really like the way they do things, and we're supposed to expect to not to say anything or be nice about it, but it's difficult to make.
Right.
But I may be doing more of it before now than versus before, but I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to just stay quiet and like, hey, can you clean up this room? And it's constantly having to tell. If you don't tell them 1 day or 2 days, or you tell them 1 2 days they do it, and then you don't remind them, they don't.
Right.
They're not going to do it.
Right.
You end up doing it for them, and my room's clean. So.
But that's our karma, though. At the end of the day.
Right. So, does anybody have any help for this cleaning room situation, or how to get kids to accept chronic responsibility? That is, how to get kids to accept a responsibility and continue it and view it as their job, their work, or something that they are responsible for. I know we have a lot of years of experience between us.
I still fail.
I think we talked about
Because we try, it's the same thing like brush
Yeah.
teeth, like you have to be responsible for brushing your teeth, or you have to be responsible for taking your bath, or you have to be responsible for cleaning your room. So abstract, this is a very important problem to solve.
Bobby, I remember you had an example where one day out of the week, right?
No, we do this every day still.
Every day, okay.
So if you, what we learned from the past experience is, when things get really messy, it's very hard to fix it at the one time, right? And you spend hours fixing it. Let's say, consider your pantry, right? If you don't keep up with it, after a month or so, you may have to spend 2-3 hours to fix it, right? But I mean, not that we can do every day, but for the kid situation, what we do is we have 5 minutes walk every night. We go through the entire house almost, and anything that is not belongs to that place goes back to the place. And we do walk. I mean, you ended up doing the work, but this time at least kids are with you and they are doing it with you. So you're still spending the same time, but if you do 5 minutes every day, then I think overall mess gets much less at the end of the week, and that helps us a lot.
Right. So my kids are small, right? They're 6 and 3. So if I say, go clean your room, what they hear is that get away from me. You're not part of the family. Go do something you hate to do in a dark room over there while we have fun over here.
Correct.
And that gets away from that problem. Is that we do it together.
Right.
You know, they like to be near us. They see us working every day for, you know, at that same time every day. So they see us making the commitment, right? And so that gets over that.
Right.
Instead of go do that, it's let us do this.
And,
right?
and it's even simple as one pencil. You know, easily you can move it from here to the right place, but let them come down wherever they are. Spend 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes extra. But then they get the picture that I'm not going to pick it up. I'm not going to do it for them, and they will have to do it, and they will do it.
I think that identifies the problem. So when they see, like during the day, even if it's not a part of that 5 minutes,
Right.
they realize that's out of place. You know.
They're gonna have to do it later that day.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, either that or maybe they'll take the initiative and do it then,
Do it
right?
right,
You know, I mean, but they've identified the issue, right?
Correct.
You know.
And what
And
works
if-
is when you have 2 or more kids, right? When one is keeping up with it, other one doesn't, it actually helps because
Why? Because the other one calls the other one out.
yeah, they will call them out. So they don't
That
want to
happens
call
all day
them
in
out
my
the last
house.
5 minutes. At the night, you know, it's only one kid is working, right? Because everybody else put their own stuff back. So that kid, that helps a lot actually. So
I
I
think
use that to their advantage. Yeah.
when the responsibility comes,
Right.
they end up doing it,
Right.
right?
Of
So
course.
most people don't know how to do laundry until they go to college, right?
Right.
Right? You get the responsibility. It's like, how do I do this, right?
Mm.
Then they YouTube it today, right? And they're like, oh, this is what I got to do laundry, right? Like, so it's just a matter of how to do that. I think that dealing with it and how to deal with it is more important than doing the task,
Right.
like whatever
Absolutely.
that is,
Correct.
so that they can deal with different challenges when they come up, you know. And I think their thought process of how they think of doing that is even more important than doing that, right? You know.
So tell me another example of how other people are messing up your family life. Because a lot of times it's like the TV, right?
Social media.
Right. Yeah. So tell me another example. You want your family life to be one way, and your kids see something else, and then that messes it up. So
Are you
give
talking
me
about like third party, or are you talking about other family members?
He said anybody outside of family.
No, I'm asking you.
right, because
It's like all of that.
because the societal norms are, you know, pushed by different media, right? And unfortunately, the parents are only one, and we have to try to control the influx of norms that we do not like from external, from the television or from other families or from things like that. So what is another example of these external norms that you don't like?
Well, it's so some kids who are doing well, and this is just a general example, you know, they'll be on their devices and playing and stuff like that. Whereas I tell my kids, you know, you need to practice your work in order to do better. So you don't have that luxury until you get that good grade. So
Right.
they feel like I'm being a little too pushy and I'm not being fair. And
Right.
that's the sad part.
So how can we get kids to realize that other kids are having a good time because they finished their work and did it properly? One way I did it was I said, because my daughter has good grades in everything except for one subject she's slipping, handwriting, right? And so I said, well, we need to work on this one. We need to put extra work on this one. And then I said, I have things that I'm working on that I don't do well, that I need to work on. And they said, what? And then I, you know, disclosed that, well, I don't do this well. And so I'm working on it. And you see me working on it every day, right? And so she said, oh, okay, so I just have to do extra work on this handwriting until it's back up with the other grades. And I said, well, now you got it, right? Anybody else with how to deal with this? Over here. Okay, over there too. Anybody else with how to deal with that your kids are not like other kids who get good things because they do good things. They finish their work on time and finish it properly.
I think that's a double-edged sword because you are now comparing. My kids always say, "You comparing me to someone else." And
Right.
That's not the intent.
Right.
the intent is that, that's the only way we're used to benchmarking ourselves or saying that, hey, if someone else can do it, then we should be able to do it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that specific person, but it just ends up being called out like that. So I think
Right.
that really helping them is to spend time with them to go do it. And in the case of doing it with them, and since I've semi-retired and since February, I see a huge change in the way they think or what they were doing wrong, because I never understood. I was like, oh, well, you could fix this by this, right? And they're like, yeah, and then they wouldn't understand why, right? And so, I don't know, it's just small things from like math problems, right? Like concept is wrong from the beginning, so it gets screwed up at the end all the time.
Right.
And they make the same mistake.
Yeah.
Like most people that do math, if you give them the same problem again that they got wrong, they make the same mistake without knowing it, even when they check it. So, coming up with different ways to do it. And I think that the more involved you are, like you doing it with them, whether that's cleaning or going to the room and doing something, it makes you build trust with them.
Right.
Right? Which, that's the fundamental part of trying to grow that relationship forward, that, hey, I can trust you to come and talk to you, and whether it's that or anything else for that matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, going back to it, I think that there are all these external factors, that he's talking about. And, a device is one of them. I mean, things that we do for devices is that we time them out.
Mm-hmm.
So, my youngest daughter, hers gets timed out at 8 o'clock. So she doesn't get it, and she only gets 30 minutes.
Right.
So after that, she loses the Wi-Fi anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
So, there are lots of different ways to do that type of control that helps narrow that down, and then they know, right, that they're out of time.
Yeah, so now the youngest one, he's learned this, because my daughter used to say occasionally, he eats his heads up, he says, I'm bored, until you actually sit there. And I don't have that much time in a day. If I come home or whatever, at 6 o'clock, you only have 2.5 hours to do everything from eating to the homework to even your own personal time.
Right.
Before they go to sleep. I'm bored. If you don't give them that, do it. Not that we give in, but they have to figure out, right, to do something.
Giving in is the right. It's the cop out for us, right? It's like, we're frustrated, and remember what Tim said. We're frustrated with ourselves, so we're like, here, right? We're the cause of
yeah, because we realize that it's us that are failing when the kids are that, because we don't have the time. Because I would like to spend an hour teaching my kids about homework, right? But the homework it's just a worksheet. It takes them 5 minutes, and I check them right, and but then I would like to spend an hour with them at dinner, and I would like to spend an hour with them in the bath, and I would like to spend an hour with them reading a story, and I would like to spend an hour with them putting them to bed, and that's 5 hours that I don't have, right? So, and we're frustrated with ourselves that we know that we don't get that time.
I think there's a lot of different ways that I've tried to resolve that. I mean, time, one thing that you don't get back, right?
Right.
So, and yes, to maximize the time, and you have to finish a whole bunch of things. I mean, my youngest one, I tell her, I was like, listen, I got to finish this. This is the priority. I just write it on a list. This is the priority. I got to do this. You got to do this, right? Why don't you help me do this for 20 minutes, and then I'll come help you do this, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, you have to find creative ways to make them involved in what you do. And it's not me all the time, right? Because my wife also feels like then I'm spending too much time with my youngest daughter or my oldest daughter doing one thing, and she doesn't get enough time. So we swap out, right? So it's not like you have to do it every day. It's just, you have to manage that versus everything else, right?
Right.
And I think that once you set the priorities of like what it is, I mean, it helps them think about their priorities too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether that's brushing their teeth in the morning or taking their clothes out the night before, so next morning we don't have a challenge of what am I going to wear,
mm-hmm.
or asking Alexa what's the weather in Sugar Land, Texas tomorrow, or whatever that is, right? And so that gets into their mind of doing that, right?
Right. And so if you want to it helps to have a list of priorities. And so does anybody know what SMART goals are?
Yeah.
What are SMART goals?
Specific, measurable, attainable. Is that what you're?
Yeah.
To realistic, and key
Tangible.
Time bound, right. So it helps to write down your goals and write down and make sure that they're SMART. That is, they're specific goals. Like, let's say it's not a general goal like I want to lose weight. It is a specific goal of I want to lose 10 pounds. It's measurable. So it is that if we continue our example, there is a scale. A lot of times we fail at our goals because they're not measurable. If they're achievable, sometimes it might be measurable, but your goal is to lose, and specific, but your goal is to lose 50 pounds, which is not achievable. They're relevant or resource. That is, do you have the right resources to achieve your goal? If your goal is to lose 10 pounds and there are cookies and chips in your pantry, your goal is not resourced properly, right? You are setting yourself up for failure. And sometimes it's you don't have what you need. So your goals are not resourced. And that they're time bound. That you have a specific time in which to accomplish your goal. And I want to lose 10 pounds in 3 months, right? And so if you just say, if you have all the other things, I want to lose 10 pounds and I have the healthy stuff I need and I have a scale and all that, but then you don't say when it is, well, it's 2 years later and you're only 5 pounds down, right? Which was not your goal, right? And so especially a lot of times New Year's are the time for setting these goals. It will help because when you have that list and you write it down, first of all, it's rewiring your brain just writing down the list. Because when you write something, you make it real. Just like when you say something, you make it real. Just like when you do something, you make it even more real. There are different layers of reality that we talked about, right? And so it's more than just thinking about it. So the writing it down of the goals itself helps. And also, putting that piece of paper that you written it down on where you can see it every day will be that external source of mindfulness. So instead of you remembering it all the time, it will be that external source. Your phone is a good place to write it down because you look at your phone every day and you'll see it. Oh, am I working on these goals? That will help you resist the temptation to have dessert that day because you saw it and then that helps you. And then you see it again the next day and that helps you. That's that external source of mindfulness. So I recommend everybody write down these SMART goals that you have for your life. I did it, and it really helped me. It helped me do a lot of things that I kind of was planning on doing, but didn't really have any motivation behind getting the goals done because they're kind of these goals that I could accomplish at any time. But has anybody used this SMART goal process and has it made a difference in their life?
Actually, in school nowadays, they're starting a new school and they're doing exactly the same thing. Now, rather than, the concept is that it's FBISD school, the concept they're using now is, every child could have a different learning goals and they make them write down. So there is some goals that are required by the board, but then there's an individual child who will have a go. And they have to write them down themselves or with the help of parent. And a similar concept, and every week when the folder comes home, you take a look at it. So I think, or to just add to it that yes, I think this works. I have done that in the professional side, and it has helped. And it's 2 ways I've seen. You keep it in front of you, and then you focus on it day to day. You really achieve it. Otherwise, if you just look at it at the year end when the performance evaluation comes. Right. So I think it works definitely. And I remember one of the teacher came here for college prep. And she mentioned, the goal. I mean, when you come to college and you really start that at the kindergarten level, and the small things such as setting up goals, I think it's part of it.
Right.
So we've done it, but not for our kids as much.
Right.
As I think we should.
So maybe we can have a SMART goal write down with our kids to have our room clean every week on this day. And we go through it, and we walk through it every week, and we say, oh, the room's not clean, this was our goal, and we put it on their wall, and they have that idea that, oh, okay, it's not just dad saying, go clean your room, and he forgets about it. He's like, dad's going to be looking at this every week, And then, I get a little reward every week if I did it myself and I put a check mark next to it that week. Something like that can bring our kids into the picture, and we can set up goals as a family. One thing I'd like to mention to you guys is that most people make the same mistakes over and over again in their life. And your job is to understand what those mistakes are for you. That is, most people don't learn from their mistakes, and that's why they make the same mistakes over and over and over, whether it's with money, whether it's with women, whether it's with their job, whether it's with relating to people, things like that, is that they can't overcome themselves. And so they just go through their life making the same mistake over and over. So if you have any of those, then really try to work on those, because those mistakes are overcomable. I don't think that's a word. And you can have a better life by applying what we learn here and what we discuss here, whether it's Jainism or not, whether it's with kids, whether it's with family. But the trick is to getting what we discuss here outside of here. So I think that was a good discussion today. It wasn't me talking too much, so that's good. Hopefully that will continue. Any other questions or comments?
Well, one thing is, and as you mentioned, whether it's SMART goals and overcoming ourselves, and both the things ties to what Nick said earlier. I think in the current society, the challenge is the environment is such a way that we're pulled away from kids. In this example,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a force that's pulling us out. For example, it's our own chores or our kind of private time or things like that we want to do, which usually ends up, for me, it's always Facebook and WhatsApp.
Right.
Versus spending the time with kids. And Nirek tells me a lot that I'm bored. I mean, that's his way of getting my attention. So I've now jokingly called him Mr. Bored, because he's like, okay, you're not Nirek, you're bored. So now he knows that when that happens, now I realize it for myself. Whenever I have to joke, that means it's something I need to wear him down by playing ball or something like that. Whatever he wants to do for 15-20 minutes. When I wear him down, he's ready for taking a break.
Right.
So I think it's inevitable for all of us to spend more and more time, which we have limited because of traveling and things like that. So somehow, if we can make this happen and figure out what works when they are either when you see them, or whether it's Bhavin's example, I think we're going to try that as well, that you spend time and recognize but it's going to take time, and I think what we'll have to figure out is how to spend that quality time without distractions that we have, more so with the social media.
Right, and obviously the problem is that the kids want all of your time, right? They want an unlimited amount of your time, which we obviously don't have. So the problem is having the time that we do have be quality time, right? Just like every kid will test your patience more than you have patience. Even you have the most patient, if you're the most patient person in the world, it's the nature of a child to push past that, to find where that line is, right? And so it's not a matter of if we lose our patience, and it's not the problem is that we're losing our patience. It's the problem is our reaction to that, or what happens when we lose our patience, because it's inevitable that we'll lose our patience, just like it's inevitable that we won't have enough time to do everything that a kid requires.
Yeah, just adding to what Nirek and everybody, the way we are discussing on this topic, right? What I have realized is over the past few months, where it's been really a roller coaster ride on the work side, I've been very occupied with work. Even if I'm at home, I'm actually not present.
Right.
And kids really get that very easily. I mean, within 5 minutes they can tell whether your dad is actually present here mentally, or is he thinking of something else.
Right.
So
they've known you their whole life.
Yeah. So what I am trying to do these days is, once I'm home, I keep these away, and now I've started putting this in airplane or silent mode.
Mm-hmm.
Because what happens is, even though I come back home say at 5:30 or 6, and my other client is in LA in PST zone, so they are 2 hours behind me.
Right.
They expect that, and they keep, there are calls. So I've stopped taking those calls after I'm home, and how can I do that? So I don't even know if somebody called me.
Right.
So nowadays what I do is I put that cell phone away and really spend that 2 hours or whatever quality time you may want to call focused, because if this is there, trust me, you will start checking WhatsApp when you are with your kids, asking him to do a homework, and then he'll ask you a question, and then you're so engrossed in the phone, you're checking something or you're trying to reply on your Outlook emails. That somehow I feel makes it you are distracted at the first place and not giving the time that they really want. So I'm trying this out where I'm trying to put it, and trust me, 2 hours, nothing is going to, hell is not going to break loose, because you're not reachable, or you're not answering any calls, or you're not responding to emails or even WhatsApp, right? So I think that will somehow make a difference, and I see my elder one actually recognizes, especially when I'm playing soccer with him, I don't take the phone also with me, because I know I can be called by people around, and I don't want to break that momentum when I'm playing with them. So that way he's really happy.
One thing you guys may not realize is that people under 30 most of them keep their phones on silent. And when I say silent, I mean silent. Like you might think vibrate. No, not even vibrate, because if it's on the table, you can hear it vibrate. And you know why? It's because they know they're going to look at their phone eventually, within 30 minutes or within an hour, right? So if the phone is on silent and nobody calls each other, right? They'll text each other, right? And so the phone is, if you're under 30, most likely your phone is always on silent, okay? Because you know you're going to eventually end up looking at it and responding when you have time to a text or to a post or to anything like that. You know you're going to do that multiple times a day. Let's say you do it 10 times a day. Well, then you access it on your time. The vibration isn't bothering you. Even if it's in your pocket, the vibration isn't bothering you. You're still focused on what you're doing. So that might be something that we can learn from young people. Thanks, everybody, for coming today. I really appreciate that.